Seeing as how my previous esteemed and learned colleagues threw the gauntlet down with the nerd jokes, I did have one I wanted to share with people. All right, 2 hydrogen atoms meet. One looks at the other and says, "Oh, I think I lost my electron." The other one says, "Are you sure?" And the first one said, "Yeah, I'm positive." All right, I'll let you all chew on that one. So a couple of things I wanted to talk about is on the combustion boiler side and water heaters. All right, so this is more of a combustion update. I'm not going to be going over what all of the other updates are. By the way, in case people missed it, NRCan would like faucets to be considered energy-consuming devices, but we won't go into that at this particular moment. I do have my soapbox here, so I always like to bring this one up for anybody new in the industry, because nobody told me this when I started, and I felt like a bit of a goofball. But as we have all learned from Super Bowls, there are Roman numerals, all right? Super Bowls are numbered in Roman numerals, and in Canada, we use the metric system. So capital M means different things depending on what system you're talking about. All right, so if you're talking about a Super Bowl, M is a Roman numeral and it means 1,000. But in Canada, M is mega, and mega is different from Roman numeral 1,000. So mega is 10 to the 6, 100,000, and then M is 1,000. It means different things. So when you see MBTUs or MBH, that's not 1,000,000 BTUs an hour, that's 1,000 BTUs per hour. And in case anybody's ever noticed, if you follow what's happening with natural gas right now, hopefully all are, because it's going to be very expensive this winter. When you buy natural gas, it's BTUs. That's 1,000, that's 1,000,000 BTUs. You could shorten that. As Canadians, as we know, it could be 10 to the 6 mega BTUs. But I just wanted to point that out to anybody that's new here. All right, when you see MBH, that's not 1,000,000 BTUs. That's 1,000 BTUs. And God help you if you write a kilo BTU, because that's just totally confusing. All right, but I did want to point that out to anybody that's new. All right, so for those who are unaware, in Canada, energy-consuming equipment is regulated by the federal government. All right, and Canada, we've got some rules. They're not quite as dramatic as American rules, as we all know. But we do have rules in Canada, and we have something called the Energy Efficiency Act, and in the Energy Efficiency Act, all of the things that are regulated are listed, okay? So all kinds of things. Faucets, as I mentioned, could be in there soon. But of course, gas-burning appliances are in there, and for us specifically, we're talking boilers and water heaters and gas fireplaces and light bulbs and battery chargers and blah, blah, blah. All kinds of equipment are in the Energy Efficiency Act, and every once in a while, we like to make an amendment to the Energy Efficiency Act. Again, not as dramatic as the American amendments. They've got the Fifth Amendment and all those things. Very dramatic amendments. Our amendments are a little less dramatic, but we do have amendments to the Energy Efficiency Act, and we like to talk about minimum energy performance standards in the Energy Efficiency Act, or MEPS is the acronym. So coming up in Amendment 15, this is our 15th amendment, a couple of things are now in scope. One of them is household boilers. And in Canada, household are things that go in people's houses. They used to be called residential, but you will notice that that term residential is deliberately being removed from common parlance, so it's not a residential boiler anymore, it is a household boiler in Canada. In America, they like to call them consumer boilers. All right, so consumer in America, household in Canada, but whatever, these things that go in our houses are being regulated, and the MEPS, the minimum energy performance standard for these pieces of equipment, is being increased. All right, so household gas boilers, and as I'm sure everybody in the room here is aware, household boilers are measured with the energy efficiency metric called AFUE, Annual Fuel Utilization Efficiency. That is a specific test protocol, as we know, and all of the manufacturers of pieces of equipment regulated piece of equipment have to disclose what their energy performance metrics are, on their literature, et cetera. As salespeople, we can always embellish, and we'll say, ooh, it's up to 99% efficient, but we can say that as salespeople because it's up to. But in terms of what's in writing, you have to be very clear and specific with what your efficiency metrics are. And up until recently, as many of you were aware, in Canada we can sell non-condensing household boilers, like right now, non-condensing, and we can sell condensing. And as Mr. House and Mr. Morgan were talking about before, and Mr. Siegenthaler earlier, we know we're all kind of moving towards higher efficiency anyway, and the data for Canada is that the vast majority of household boilers that are shipped are in fact condensing, but there is a segment in Canada that is still non-condensing boilers, all right, household boilers. But those days are coming to an end. And very specifically, that day is going to be January 1st, 2023. So next year, that's less than a year from now, in Canada, we will not be able to ship non-condensing boilers if they were manufactured after July 1st, 2023. And I should have mentioned that earlier, but when NRCan likes to put these rules out, same with Americans, by the way, but those are based on manufacture date. Right? It's not an install date or a building permit date or something like that. It's what does the rating plate on the piece of equipment say? And as of now, July 1st, 2023, if your boiler is not condensing, and very specifically condensing means it's got an AFUE of greater than 90%, all right? But if it doesn't have an AFUE greater than 90%, in the middle of next year, you ain't selling that thing anymore. All right, so I wanted people to be aware of that. Again, God is not going to strike you down with lightning if you ship something that's got a June 2023 production date on its rating plate, and you need to put that into some B-vent chimney. But if it's made after July 1st, 2023, it must be condensing for sale in Canada. And there are there were some nuances over the years about boilers that had domestic water, heaters or tankless coils or whatever the heck we want to call the things. But basically, if it was if it was a unit that made domestic hot water and a unit that was just heating only, there was some differentiation. But as I'm sure you're all reading on the screen here, that is over, right? This is now, if the thing makes domestic hot water and it's a boiler, or if it's a boiler only, it must be condensing. And as we said earlier, condensing is good. High efficiency is good. Nothing in this rule compels the designer or skilled trades or whatever to install a condensing boiler so that it condenses. Okay, so we heard that in the last session. I think NRCan is relying on you as the skilled trades and as the practitioners and the designers, et cetera, to apply these things correctly. Fingers crossed that you do. Please do try to install condensing boilers so that they condense, so that we can meet these efficiency targets. But really, the biggest concern for a great many is the venting. This rule applies, we just can't ship boilers made after July 1st, 2023 that are condensing. So if it's a retrofit job, and you had whatever your atmospheric boiler was chugging away in that particular application, could have been for a great many years. Maybe it's vented with B-vent or something. Just be aware, as you all know, I'm sure, venting is an issue with condensing technology. And especially skilled trades, licensed skilled trades, people do have your license number in these places. You have got to, be punctilious. I would say the word is you need to be very careful about venting these appliances. They do need to be vented in this country with certified vent systems, as we all know. Don't vent condensing boilers into B-vent chimneys. And I'm seeing you're all going, what idiot would do that? And I will make no comment. I wasn't looking at Jeff or anything. Now, commercial boilers, we got household boilers have to be condensing starting next year. Commercial boilers, the same thing is going to be happening, all right? But the commercial boiler date and commercial boilers are over or outside of the scope of AFUE, so anything over 300,000 BTU input, or 300 MBH input if you pick that up. 300,000 BTU input, up to 12.5 million BTUs, starting in 2025. Okay, so that's a little bit down the road, but that's in about 10 minutes, the way all this is going. Pandemic started 2 years ago. We're closer than that to this condensing boiler rule. And this means that commercial boilers will have to have a minimum efficiency of 90%. Okay, and there's some, it could be a thermal efficiency, a combustion efficiency, blah, 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 whatever. That means that they're going to be condensing. And commercial boilers need to be condensing if they've got a production date after, January 1st, 2025. And it applies to new construction or retrofit. All right, so if you've got some job somewhere, and there could be 2 or 3 boilers that have been chugging away down there for some years, if one of them dies, you got to replace it. It's going to have to be replaced with a condensing piece of equipment. And as we know, again, that includes venting, complexities. The chances for venting complexity are much, much bigger, especially when you're doing retrofit. New construction, if it's somebody's house or some new, 5-story building or something, we all know that that can be handled. But you, as the skilled trades, especially, need to be very careful with how you're going to vent these things when it's a retrofit job. And just a couple of examples up here. They're mostly, kind of local, but these were, these were all retrofit jobs, and sometimes they don't go as smoothly as building owners would like. And people do tend to get upset when they see, in the minds of some, noxious smoke coming out of the side of their building. That does tend to excite people sometimes. So you, as the skilled trade, will need to do a good job and explain, hey, this is not noxious, deadly, anthrax. This is water vapor, coming off your boiler. But there are some interesting solutions that people will have to come up with. It is not a slam dunk to do retrofit with the condensing boilers. And I just want people to keep that in mind, okay? Because there will not be a choice in Canada coming up soon. Now, moving right along, in Amendment 15, also covered were commercial storage water heaters, all right? And the rules are a little weirder, I think, more weird, however you say that correctly. For water heaters, there is a differentiation between new construction or retrofit. And when it gets down to it, of course, it's going to be up to the local authority having jurisdiction as to how they would interpret that. But generally, it means if a building permit was necessary, then it's going to have to be considered new construction. If it's just a re, and in this province, a re, you don't need a permit, generally speaking. Might be an inspection or something, but you don't need a permit. That's cool. But if a permit is needed, there is going to be an interpretation out there that says, hey, that's new construction, so you got to comply with the new rules. So in the water heater world, there were 2 different kind of categories of storage water heater. One of them is called a residential duty commercial water heater. I'm sure people install those, but those are storage water heaters, between 75,000 and 105,000 BTUs. All right. And anyway, if you can read the nuances on the screen, they're talking about uniform energy factor, UEF, being significantly higher for new construction than it is for the second line there, which is for retrofit. And basically that means your residential duty commercial water heater will need to be condensing, all right, for new construction. If it's not new construction, I would say most of the storage water heaters shipped to this country are going to be good to go anyway. They've all got a high enough, minimum efficiency metric that there really isn't a big change. There's going to be, depending on the manufacturer, there's going to be a couple of models that are toast, but generally speaking, you're good. For water heaters greater than 105,000 BTUs, your commercial water heaters that you're putting into full-on commercial applications, restaurants and the multifamily and all the rest of it. Again, it's the same thing. New construction, they're going to have to be condensing, all right? Retrofit, the efficiency level, as you can see there, is a little bit less. So the commercial water heater efficiency MEPs are a little different. They're based on a thermal efficiency, and then there's something called a standby loss factor there. And the standby loss is just, to try to take into account how massive is your water heater. So there's a penalty for big water heaters that shed a lot of heat. And again, for retrofit, I would say, most manufacturers of the storage water heaters have a lot of equipment. Again, not everything is going to make it, but the vast majority of water heaters now that are sold in this country are going to be good. But new construction, people need to be careful, all right? And if you've got any stakeholders with whom you're working, and make sure they're aware. Don't specify a non-condensing water heater. This date is approaching rapidly, right? It's July 1st, 2023. So that is in the middle of next year. And if you're shipping these water heaters, they will need to be condensing. And I can tell you, we are expecting that the authority having jurisdiction is going to be watching this, right? This could be kind of, what do they say, prosecuted with extreme prejudice, and people would need to be careful. Just like with boilers, we all know water heaters that burn gas need to be vented. And venting can be complicated with the condensing products, right? There are vent length limitations, there are vent material limitations, et cetera. And we just want to bring this to your attention, keep this in mind when you're thinking about this kind of thing. All right, so this rule is coming up pretty soon. If your water heater is going to a new construction project, keep an eye on that date, all right, of production of the water heater. All right, and then one last note I wanted to make here was on instantaneous, which is a misnomer, right? There's no such thing as an instantaneous water heater. They're tankless water heaters, I think was our preferred term, but it doesn't matter. They're called instantaneous, so whatever. In this country, instantaneous water heaters, 200,000 BTUs and below, must be condensing. Probably many of you are aware of that. They've had to be condensing for a little while at this point. I want to draw special attention to it because in America, that is not true, right? Americans can still ship non-condensing tankless water heaters. That's not true in Canada. And we know none of you would ever do this. You would always be using your esteemed local wholesaler. But don't drive down to Buffalo and buy a water heater and bring it back, because technically that's against the rules. All right, but in Canada, we got to have condensing tankless water heaters. So the rules are not the same between Canada and the U.S. And it's important because sometimes if you're participating in whatever the online things that people have been doing, we all know that this industry was labeled an essential service, so probably not all of you were able to watch a lot of webinars, during the pandemic lockdown times. I wasn't so essential, I guess. I watched a lot of webinars, and a great many of them are in America. And sometimes when you're watching an American, deliver some specific piece of information, it might not be applicable to Canada. So it's important to differentiate that there are two different countries. The flags have the same kind of colors, but they're a little bit different. But we are a distinct nation, and we have our own rules. And in the U.S., non-condensing product is still available, but as you can see for us, coming very soon, non-condensing product is off the table. All right, so I wanted to make sure that there was that distinction. Now, switching gears from what is happening to what could be happening, and what could be happening, that's a pretty big topic. All kinds of things could be happening. But I do want to share a couple of specifics here. And Canada, generally speaking, as we probably know, and as Mr. Siegenthaler was saying, will try to avoid political discussions, but if Canada could turn off natural gas tomorrow, they would. Right? We all know that. This country is definitely marching towards electrification, and that drumbeat is loud. So there is, some of you may have heard that there's this group, the Canadian ministers of the environment do get together, and they have this rather powerful group that meets on occasion by Zoom. most of the time, all of the participants keep their clothes on. Every once in a while, somebody seems to be in the background changing after their bike ride, but most of the time they're good. And they've published what are listed as aspirational targets. Okay, so aspirational targets mean it's not written in code yet, it's not codified, but that's kind of where we want to go. And I believe in politics that's called hoisting it up the flagpole to see how it waves, launching a trial balloon, blah, blah, blah. But this is in writing. It is the aspirational goals of Canada to say that by 2035, okay, so that's not tomorrow, but that's not too far away, by 2035, we would like all space heating technologies, and all water heating, so when they say water, domestic hot water, all space heating technologies and all domestic hot water heating technologies to have an efficiency greater than 100%. Okay, so an EF, a COP, whatever the heck you want to call it, they want it to be greater than 100%. And that probably sounds a bit weird to some of you, to the regular human. It's like, what are you talking about, greater than 100%? But as Mr. Siegenthaler talked this morning, we all know that heat pumps operate with a coefficient of performance, greater than 1. Electric resistance stuff, right? Electric resistance water heater, electric resistance baseboard, some sort of plug-in electric heater for under your desk. Those all operate at a maximum of 100%. So electric resistance stuff has usually got a coefficient of performance of 1.0 or an energy factor of 1.0 or something. Canada has aspirationally stated that we would like all those efficiencies to be greater than 100%. And that is going to mean electric resistance is out, right? Everything will need to be a heat pump process of some sort. Doesn't mean it's going to be vapor compression, with some sort of earth-destroying refrigerant. It's going to be, gas absorption or different types of technology. But this is kind of the way Canada is couching where it is we're going. And if you look at the little march here, if I go back, on the boiler side, if you start at the top of the slide, it says short term, by 2025, we want all fuel technologies to be 90%. Well, that's done. That is published. It is the law of the land in this country. And then they've got some medium-term goals, which likely will be met because of the federal government, and they can write that stuff down. And then longer-term goals. So it is as written right now in this country. Gas combustion, if it's not in a heat pump, process, likely will be toast, and electric resistance, it appears, when you read this, likely is not going to be permitted. And, I'm sure some of you are thinking that dude is on drugs, but all you need to do, for example, is look at, as again, Mr. Siegenthaler had said, City of Seattle and the state of Washington have rules that do not allow electric resistance heating in their buildings. And if anybody have spent time, speaking of drugs, on the west coast of Canada, in Vancouver, something like that, a lot of those towers downtown, the space heating is electric resistance, baseboard in the suites. And Seattle, very specifically, has said that is not on. Your domestic water system must be heat pump, and your space heating must be heat pump. Electric resistance is not allowed. And it's got to start somewhere. Somebody tries it, gets it passed in whatever their legislation is, and then poof, like wildfire, it's kind of going across the country. So it's not out of the question. And some of you may have seen this already, and it was discussed again this morning in Mr. Siegenthaler's thing, but so people are aware, so this is new construction, and new construction does include if it's a major gut, so if it's a substantial renovation, you would need a building permit. In the city of Vancouver, and Vancouver and Toronto are similar in that they can do things that they want. They can do things outside of what the province requires. But basically, you can't have gas combustion. Now, they're not saying it has to be vapor compression heat pump, but City of Vancouver says if it's a new house in Vancouver, it cannot be gas combustion, all right? And that came into effect. You'll see the date there. It's kind of the top bullet, January 1st, 2022. So that's already happened, right? So it's not impossible. They've already done it. And there is a number of, kind of new considerations that when city halls get on a roll, baby, they start writing stuff down. And there are some changes to the what's called the Vancouver Building Bylaw that are coming fast and furious. And then the province of British Columbia took this action. They effective April 1st, the PST, okay, so not the GST, but the provincial side of the sales tax, for what they call fossil fuel combustion systems, which is a 4-letter acronym. And if anybody has learned anything, we like 3-letter acronyms, people. 4-letter acronyms are too confusing. But anyway, this is a 4-letter acronym, FFCS. Fossil fuel combustion systems, the tax was increased from 7 to 12%. So this was for your 10 million BTU boiler, your big Scotch Marine boiler. This was for your 48,000 BTU furnace. If it burned gas, propane, oil, whatever, if it burned fossil fuels, condensed dinosaurs, that tax rate almost doubled. Okay, and it was 100% removed from heat pumps. So the PST for your VRF systems, for heat pumps, whatever your vapor compression system was, there was no tax. All right. I would like to point out that cigarettes didn't change the PST, so we're more dangerous than cigarettes, I guess, in the minds of some. And then in that province as well, changing from the taxing to some of their regulations. The 2 regulations I went through for us is from the federal government for the household boilers and the commercial boilers. The province of British Columbia put those dates before what the federal government did. So nanny poo-poo. We were first, federal government wrote the rules, and then BC says, we're not gonna wait that long. So the residential boilers for condensing was January 1st this year, and then the commercial boilers will start January 1st in 2023. So if any of you like to commute to Vancouver and do some work, just be aware that those rules are kicking in soon. And I know these ones are hard to see from an eye test standpoint, but anybody that does commercial, especially commercial work in the city of Toronto, we've got the Toronto Green Standard. We're on revision 4 of the Toronto Green Standard right now. And if anybody has looked at this at all, you know that the energy use of your building is getting kind of squeezed down. Various jurisdictions are doing that by tracking different types of the energy use from the building. And the other thing to know about is the greenhouse gas intensity of your building, the GHGI. So the greenhouse gas intensity is how much carbon dioxide is being used, at the site to run your building. And if you can see on the little table there on the right-hand side, that GHGI number is just getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And you'll see on the very right-hand column, again, as Mr. Siegenthaler had said, it's going to net zero, meaning there can be 0 GHGI for your building, meaning you cannot burn any gas at your building. And this is for non-Part 9 buildings, but make no mistake, I think I got a slide coming on that. I won't give it away just yet. I wanted to put this one up in case people were unaware that the building permits are not free. Like that's 100 Gs now, right? $100,000 for the permit for your single-family dwelling. This is City of Toronto. But on the right hand side, the bottom right table there is showing what kind of rebate you can get from the City of Toronto if you are complying with these kind of more efficient, projects now. So, so starting, now, basically it was August 2022. If you try to build your single-family detached dwelling now, you get, what is that, $8,000 back of your $100,000 building permit. I guess that's better than a swift kick in the butt. But just be aware that those are the kind of numbers we're talking about now. And if there is some encouragement to go to the higher performing buildings, but soon it's not going to be allowed at all. All right, getting down to time here, I did want to point out that in this province in Ontario, for commercial buildings, non-Part 9 buildings, boilers for new construction already had to be condensing as of 2017. All right, so I don't know if anybody knew that, but if you had a building permit, and it's complicated. Commercial construction, I understand, is complicated. I don't pretend to understand all the nuances of what goes on with the building permits. And if you're a consulting engineer, design engineer, perhaps they're a little more aware. But starting in 2017, there used to be this rule in what was called the Energy Efficiency Act in the province. As people are aware, the current administration, revoked that particular rule, and they put all this boiler efficiency stuff, very logically, into the Electricity Act. So if anybody's ever looking for the minimum efficiency for commercial boilers in the province of Ontario, you just look as you normally would in the Energy Efficiency Act. But it is there, and it does say if it's a new construction project, the boilers must be condensing, and if it's retrofit, they have to have a minimum 83% efficiency, which gets down to, again, are you listening to a sales guy, like me, or are you listening to what the literature says about what the efficiency is? All right? And another thing that is occurring, Ontario is the only province in Canada so far that has got this codified, but in case people aren't aware, we have got an energy and water use recording mandatory requirement for big buildings. Not houses yet, but big buildings. So starting next year, anybody that owns a building 75,000 square feet or more, 50,000 square feet. Anyway, that could be a nice house on the bridle path, I guess, but really they're talking commercial buildings, that are 55 or 75,000 square feet. You have to report your energy and water use, right? So how much gas did you use? How much electricity did you use? How much water did you use? And big buildings, anything that was over 200,000 square feet, that mandatory legal requirement, it's in the Electricity Act where you expect it to be, all that reporting was required, starting in 2018, 2019. And the province does have a nice little database of how much energy these buildings are consuming. And from a science-based standpoint, you have got to know what the heck is going on before you can start regulating it. And that's fair in my view. But on the other hand, now that data is being collected, and again, starting next year in 2023, any building that was whatever the heck the size is, don't know why I can't read it, but it's either 50 or 75,000 square feet, there's going to be naming and shaming going on, right? And you're going to know what the building archetype is, based on what your property taxes are, and you're going to know how much energy was being used. And you have to report this every year, by the way. We'll have a good idea of what's going on. And then, as we all know, eventually, when new rules come into place, the amount of energy you're using in that building is going to be squished down with 100% certainty, make no mistake. I couldn't tell you if that timeline is going to be 5 years, is that timeline going to be 10 years? But once that data is available, then action can be taken. And Ontario at the moment is the only province in Canada that requires it. There are some other jurisdictions in Canada that encourage reporting of your building energy use, but this province, it's a mandatory requirement. So I wanted people to be aware of that. And then, but on the climate change thing, we said we're going to stay away from politics. Be aware of the kind of bloviating that sometimes occurs. So this little article was in it was on the TV is when I first saw it, and it was talking about the cruise ship terminal in Victoria. And if you can see, I don't have a laser pointer, but what does it say here? It says, according to the Greater Victoria Harbour Authority, ships account for 96.3% of all greenhouse gas emissions at that cruise terminal. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I understand. The cruise ships are the huge, big things that pull up that carry your 3,000 tourists that come in and spend some money. Those kinds of narratives, in my view, are not helpful. We're trying to move our society more towards a sustainable future. Talking about what is happening at one building on one street isn't so great. And I know none of you are going to be doing that, but I just would like to encourage you, don't in my view, please don't buy into that kind of stuff when you see those things happening, okay? And then I think there's just 2 more slides. Other jurisdictions in Canada are really starting to ramp up the tightening of the rules. So for example, the mayor of Montreal had said that city is going to basically say no more gas. Not written yet, it was a statement, but we'll see what happens by the end of this year. Apparently City Council will have some sort of info coming soon, but that's in the city of Montreal. And then the federal government here is not sitting idly by while the Americans get to pass all these rules, et cetera. We've got some more Energy Efficiency Act amendments coming. One of them is Amendment 18, and it very specifically highlights those things that are in red, which I can't read, but I'll tell you they do include water heaters. And what will happen with household storage water heaters, and probably this will be effective 2025, so coming up pretty soon, and it's a big deal for us Canadians. Americans are already there, but for us Canadians, this is going to be new. The Energy Star program, as a lot of you are aware, you get Energy Star equipment, and in the United States, the metric for Energy Star for water heaters is something called Uniform Energy Factor, UEF. But in Canada, we don't use UEF all the time. Sometimes we use UEF, sometimes we use standby loss, sometimes we use something called EF, or just energy factor. And it's a little bit muddled, a cluster cuss if you ask me, but whatever, that's just how we are. That is going to be solved with Amendment 18. And we as Canadians will now be using UEF for all, kind of household-sized storage water heaters, if it's electric, if it's gas, or whatever. And that's coming. So I just wanted to let people know that one's coming soon too, and it will impact how it is you sell these things to your homeowners. So with that was the end of my remarks. Be aware, condensing residential boilers next year. So if you got any jobs that are vented with B-Vent now and you need to swap them out now, better do it, because that option's going to be gone soon.